Hey everyone, welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show live. Excellent. Today, it looks like we have managed to go live without any snafus. So, with the audio and stuff, with the snafus with the audio or anything. So, welcome to the show. We're going to wait for a couple of seconds in case there are other people joining. Excited to have you all here today. So today we're going to talk about SKAdNetwork. We're going to talk about SKAdNetwork or SKAdNetwork, howsoever you call it, and what you can do with SKAdNetwork as a marketer. I'm going to share my screen and we can jump right in to today's presentation. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. Excellent. And if you guys have questions or comments, please type in the chat and we can go from there. Really, I would also say, if you can't make this or if you have to leave in between, we will share these slides. We will share a full transcript right afterward. Well, it'll take a couple of hours, potentially tomorrow, but we will share slides and transcript. So don't worry if you miss out a portion of this. And really, this is meant to be a 201 session. The 101 session was, hopefully you guys attended. If not, you can check out mobileUserAcquisitionShow.com for the 101 session, which is really about what is going on, some of the basics of what's changing with IDFA deprecation. Right? So this session assumes you have some background. And this session is basically looking at what you can do as marketers, what changes for marketers if you're running user acquisition campaigns, how are things going to look different. Okay, let's get into it right now. May you live in interesting times. What I had in the last deck just as well. I like to put this as a reminder for all of us that these are interesting times. And, we are going to discover and learn and find out a lot of things just in the next couple of months. Huge thanks to a lot of people whose inputs and notes on a lot of forums informs a lot of this presentation, a lot of my thinking. Gadi from Singular, Offer from Fiber, Maur, ex-Uplift, Eric Seufert, Mobile Dev Medal, Thomas, who's an independent consultant, Nebo from Network, Pao from Good Game, and Cesare Iram from Singular. Right, all of you guys, thank you so much for all of your inputs. With that brave face, let's dive in. But there's a bit about me. Been doing UA since 2013, which seems like a very different time. Please check out mobileUserAcquisitionShow.com and rocketship.hq.com for more stuff like this. This is what we're going to cover. Really, how is conversion tracking? What's SKAdNetwork? How is conversion tracking different? Which is, I think, a very, very core portion of what is going to change with come September, right? A lot of user acquisition, a lot of our processes, a lot of our workflow is going to change. How's our conversion tracking changing? How's the targeting changing? How's our campaign structure changing? How's our measurement and reporting changing? And we'll dive into all of this. One, okay, what is SKAdNetwork? How is it different from a historical MMP? This is fairly foundational. I want to cover this because an MMP says, where did an install come from? How valuable is the install? And we know the exact revenue from each user, right? And each campaign, each ad set, each creator, and so on and so forth. You can get at any level of abstraction. You can find out what is the exact value of any post-install event performed by a user. SKAdNetwork, where did the campaign come from? Where did this source come from? Right. So how valuable is this campaign, or how valuable is this source? That's what the SKAdNetwork does. We'll dive into how that actually operates. You don't know the exact revenue value. So you cannot calculate the exact LTV, the exact ARPU, exact behavior downstream of a cohort, leave alone an individual user. what will change, right? So here's more detail about, look, this is how MMPs work, and you're certainly familiar with how all of this is, right? So you have within an MMP, you're like, oh, you have one IAP, how many people bought that? Another IAP, how many people bought that? What's the revenue from each? You get that at the user level, right? At the user level, you need to use the APIs. It's not readily downloadable. You can't just go into your MMP dashboard and say, hey, I want this user's revenue for the last 7 days, but you could certainly get that from the API and do that. You can get a lot of non-revenue events. You can get the actual LTV. You'll have to do some calculation. You have to do some cohort analysis, but this is attainable. You can get the projected LTV just as well. With SKAdNetwork, the difference is this is how things are going to look, right? There's a conversion value, and that does not correspond to actual revenues. And I'll talk about in the next slide what the conversion value is and how I recommend thinking about the conversion value. Really, the projected LTV is going to be very, very approximate. It's going to have to be our best guess. And I'll talk about why that is the case. Why is the conversion value imprecise? Here's why. Let's see how what the user's flow is like through, an onboarding flow of an app. Day 0, a user installs, and SKAdNetwork sends an install post back. It starts a timer. Let's assume within 24 hours, the user makes the first purchase. Conversion value is updated. Let's assume that's for $1, and the postback the postback isn't yet fired, and we'll come to that. Within 36 hours, there's a second purchase. The timer gets reset. The timer keeps going. Again, which is within a 24-hour period of 22. Right? So if at any point of time, 24 hours elapsed with no purchase, then the postback goes through to the ad network from Apple. I'll elaborate on what that means. Let's assume after these 2 purchases, there are no events, there are no purchases for the next 24 hours. Then the timer expires. And at some random point of time, 24 hours after that, within 24 hours after that, it could be 12 hours, it could be 6 hours, randomly decided, randomly set. And then, then the postback is fired. And Apple gets, the ad network gets the postback that says this install, or rather this campaign, had a revenue of $1 from this, $2 from this, but only the final value is seen, right? So at the end, at this point of time, at some randomly point of time, after between 60 and 84 hours after after the install, the ad network gets a ping saying, oh, this campaign had $2 in revenue. If there is a conversion after this, it is not recorded, right? So that purchase, you get the money, you make the revenues, but it is not recorded as having come from this particular campaign. Obviously, you can see why Apple wants to do this, because Apple want to preserve confidentiality. They want to make sure there's no loopholes that the identity of users doesn't leak through in any manner. So Apple wants to be extra careful around giving away anything that could even resemble personally identifiable data, right? So this is exactly how SKAdNetwork, how conversion tracking works on the SKAdNetwork. And as you can clearly see, it's not capturing 100% of revenues. And I'll talk about what's the solution to this, what's the best possible solution given the circumstances, right? So there's no ideal solution, because you'll never capture 100% of the revenue, because anything that happens after this 24-hour break is gone. So the only situation in which you'll capture all revenue is if there is one purchase every 24 hours, right? If that happens, then maybe you will, and even that you will capture only the first 64 conversions, and you're not going to capture anything afterwards. And you're going to get that at the campaign level, and campaign and source level, but you're not going to get it at the user level. And of course, if you don't have conversions every 24 hours, maybe you'll just get the first 2 conversions or the first 1 conversion. You're going to have to make the best use of that. How do you deal with this particular uncertainty, right? Just do a quick check-in. Hopefully you guys are seeing the screen, right? Hopefully the screen is visible. If that's not visible, please let me know. But this should be fairly clear. Let's keep going. I'm assuming there's no comments in the chat, so I'm assuming this is fairly clear. Thank you. Let's keep going. Okay. So defining the conversion value is very, very critical. So what do you do as a marketer? You evaluate your current sequence of events in the app to evaluate what your conversion value should be, right? So here's what I mean, right? Yeah, so day 0, user installs, value is 0, that is passed back by the SKAdNetwork, right? Day 1, so not day 1, 22 hours, user registers, you artificially assign a value to registration because that's the only event that's happening within the first 24 hours. If your first event happens 6 days afterwards, you're never going to capture that, right? So you have to find some form of proxy events. And the best way to do that is to look at your sequence of current events to see what happens within the first 7 days, ideally, to see if you can have enough event volumes passed back via SKAdNetwork to the ad network, right? And likewise, you say, oh, within 36 hours, you get to level 1. Let's call that value 2. Within 44 hours, you get to level 50. Let's call it value 4. Within 60 hours, you make your first IIP. I call that value 20, right? And the value has to be consistently increasing, consistently incremented, because otherwise SKAdNetwork's not going to register that, right? If your third event value is 1.5, then it's not going to register. Now, in this case, you say, oh, this person over the first 60 hours, their value is 20. Let's call this person a high value user. And let's look at a different user whose value is 0 after day 0, registers after 22 hours, and then just never comes back. This person is a low value user, right? So instead of looking at your D2 and D7 ARPU, you're basically looking at conversion value. The good news is you can play around with your conversion values. You can define what is your conversion value, but you need to choose wisely. That's the most important thing, okay? How might you define value? And this is through the folks at Singular. There, I read through the original spec for the solution they're developing for SKAdNetwork. And there's some very interesting insights they've given about how you might think about this, right? So one, obviously, you could just use a revenue-based model. Say, oh, first IIP within 24 hours. If that's your model, great, make it happen, right? Or certainly if you're an ad revenue supported game, supported app or game, certainly it tends to be a lot easier if the first event happens sooner than later. Then of course there's you can definitely, I think retention offers definitely significant potential in terms of what sort of mapping you can do. Just because app open is a fairly low friction event that can basically map to value, right? The value itself will be low, but certainly a retention event can be mapped. Again, as they point out here, it's recorded only as long as the user opens the app every day, because the user is opening the app on day 1, but not on day 2. That's it. So you really need to find a way to elicit events as early in the app's life cycle as possible. That could just be, register, complete FATUI, whatever the event is, you want to record that as soon as possible. Again, there's a blended, retention-based optimization, which you can again do. And, the example I shared on the last slide is really the simple funnel-based optimization, registration, subscription, share, or registration, free trial, subscription. You really need to consider and think about what front-loaded events do you map, right? And if you don't have enough front-loaded events, can you make those events front-loaded? That's really how you want to be thinking about this. And really, a lot of apps that I advise are already thinking about how they might change and modify their onboarding, or pick out the elements of the existing onboarding that can hopefully be mapped more easily in a more straightforward manner to SKAdNetwork. Right? So both those are directions you can and should be thinking about. Next, how do you think about targeting on targeting? Right? So there's two different paths that you can follow. There's a typo, there's targeting broadly, not just on SANS. One is primarily for Facebook. For Facebook, you can still use lookalikes. They have some limited utility because you have your past store of data, your IDFA or emails, hopefully, that you have collected. The past store of data can be used to build lookalikes. Certainly, definitely over the next couple of months, those can be valuable. Definitely, you can build lookalikes off of non-IDFA signals on Facebook. That's applicable only on Facebook. Bearing in mind the state of Facebook SDK is still TBD. I've been talking to Facebook. They've been fairly non-committal, other than just telling me that, look, they are talking to Apple. They are going to be plugged into SKAdNetwork. The TBD is whether they're going to get some sort of preferential treatment in SKAdNetwork, or they're just going to be accessing the exact same API as every other ad network. Regardless, the Facebook SDK can be far less powerful than it is right now, but it could be better than nothing. So certainly, I would say come September, definitely we're going to continue testing lookalikes via Facebook SDKs. We're going to continue testing lookalikes via first-party data. Typically, that can be email lists. Path 2, which targeting is really not use lookalikes. I think there's certainly a trend that some of some folks have written about. That's basically going really broad, going really with minimal targeting, 10% and above, really, that's the path that could work on Facebook and certainly on other channels where there's no concept of lookalikes. Go broad. One very likely universe is very similar to Google UAC, where there is no targeting, really, right? Use creatives to inform targeting. If you show a creative that shows an older person, maybe the creator is going to get targeted towards older people. If you show a creative that shows a dad and a kid, maybe that creator gets targeted towards dads. That's better for utilities. For games, it can be more challenging to form narratives around what creators are going to work for which audience. But really, on Google UAC at this point, we don't have an option. And really, that's the kind of world that might emerge. The other important thing that can and will emerge is really interest-based targeting. I don't know about you guys, but for us, definitely on Snap and TikTok, we use primarily interest-based targeting at this point, just because we've had somewhat limited use of lookalikes at this point. So really, I think that's going to be the path going forward just as well. Right? So that's the universe I'm preparing people for. That's the universe I recommend people be prepared for. Next, campaign structure, right? Pre-iOS 14, this is what the campaign structure looks like. Post-iOS 14, we're going to have a campaign. We may or may not have a source, right? Because it says, oh, we will provide source app ID if the values meet Apple's privacy threshold. Apple has not disclosed what that is. I've read through the documentation. I couldn't find anything, but if you guys know, please let me know what that privacy threshold is. What at this point is also unclear is it says source in Apple's documentation. It does not say ad set or creative, because if just because And in fact, the documentation says a source refers to an iTunes application ID. I did check in with the folks at Singular who are on a Slack channel, and I don't believe they have an idea either. Checked in with Facebook, they don't have an idea either as to whether you can target ad set or ad. So the universe I'm preparing people for is really the UAC universe, which is you have a campaign and you have a creative. It's possible that Facebook's going to find a creative way to work around this, but again, my recommendation is to prepare for the worst case scenario, where all you have is a campaign and a creative, and that is your campaign structure, really. Right? Another campaign you can target by geos or tiers of geos, and really, or you can have a campaign and sets of creators, teams of creatives. You can say, oh, this is a mom campaign, and we're going to have 10 creators targeted towards moms. Or this is going to be a puzzle campaign where we're going to show puzzles of a certain kind. So you can have those campaigns grouped thematically. However, I would just say prepare for a world without ad sets or ad level granularity. Certainly at smaller budgets, it becomes a lot easier. With larger budgets, more complex campaigns, more complex infrastructure, I will just say you're almost forced to simplify. You're almost forced to stay within the 100 campaign limit, which again, I do believe will feed, Facebook's push towards simplification, Google's push towards simplification. I think that's the world we're moving towards. Next, in terms of measurement, again, this is what the measurement will look like. What I spoke about earlier on in this deck. Really, you're going to get channel 1, campaign 1, source 1. And again, source 1, we may or may not get depending on Apple's privacy requirements. So really count on channel 1, campaign 1, channel 2, campaign 2, channel 3, campaign 3. These are reported to the respective channels via SKAdNetwork. SKAdNetwork reports to the channel reports it to you. And of course, if you've been reading some of the stuff that the MMPs are speaking about, their proposition is really that this data needs to be aggregated, and this needs to be aggregated and organized and communicated in an advertiser-readable form, more comprehensible form, and that is the place they envision for themselves. What I also understand based on the inputs from the folks at Singular on the Mobile Dev Memo channel. Again, please check that out. Definitely, there's some great conversations. Please check that out. Is the conversion value isn't encrypted, and therefore there is potential for fraud without an intermediary. But really, you could function without an MMP, really, so to speak. You could basically collect this data from your ad network partners, especially if all you do is run one channel. If you're running Google and Facebook, you could basically collect this data from Google and Facebook. At this point of time, we don't have concrete inputs from Google and Facebook as to what their structure is going to look like. And perhaps, once we do have clarity on that, that's what the next session could look like. But really, this is what, at a high level, measurement is going to look like, right? So overall, hopefully, as you can see, our entire workflow as marketers changes with targeting, measurement, just the way we calculate LTV, the way we measure performance is completely different. And that's the world I'm preparing a lot of people for, a lot of our clients for, a lot of people I advise for, and hopefully that is something you will be cognizant of as you go forward, right? And hopefully this also imparts to you that this is by no means the end of marketing. Just as you can see, you are operating a marketing operation. It's just very different from what it used to be, right? And at this point, I'm not ruling out possibilities. Again, I put this quote in the last presentation. I will put this again, just to say, I'm not going to call out anything as truly impossible, because I think a lot of solutions are emerging. We're keeping our eyes open, but these are the constraints within which we are operating right now. And I would say Apple is extremely unlikely to change SKAdNetwork or make allowances, just because as fully this 3 to 4 is a couple of months away. Things are not going to change that massively with Apple. What can and will change will be Facebook, will Google, the infrastructure around mobile marketing that can and will change. Right, thank you. And that is all I had. So this will be up on the mobile user acquisition show. And of course, we will have an updated version of our reading list on Rocketship HQ. So please check those out. Yeah, so we have some questions, comments right now. I'm going to read those out. Gadi, thank you for your comments. And of course, thank you for your inputs off channel that have definitely helped inform a lot of this. I'm going to quickly look at those. If I'm looking sideways, it's because I'm looking at these. Firebase, Gadi Ilyashev, CEO of Singular. Facebook SDK, Firebase SDK helps them collect data, event data from almost every app in the world. If most of the signal will be gone, how do you think it will impact the performance? Yeah, so I dare say most of the signal will not be gone, right? So a part of the signal will be gone. Certainly an important part of the signal will be gone. Facebook has what it would be, Facebook has IDFAs of users on the Facebook family of apps. Facebook has purchase behavior from IDFAs that it has associated with these IDFAs. So Facebook knows and understands this performance, right? So I dare say Facebook will build an internal device graph. That is my strongest hypothesis to Gadi's question. So I would say short term, I think there will be a dip because the strongest signal is going to go away. Longer term, I think they're going to adapt by building a new device graph based on their owned and operated first-party data. Right? So Matt Howell, does the new Apple privacy messaging allow publishers to use historical data for ongoing targeting? That's a good question. I don't think it forbids using historical data. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe it. I have not seen anything in the documentation that forbids using historical data. It says future data, hey, would you like to be tracked in the future? Yes or no. That is the prompt. That is the spirit of the prompt. And certainly if you have emails, I'm imagining that is collected with some sort of consent. So certainly email first-party data can be captured, right? And thank you, Maur. Thank you, Kevin, for the kind words. Adam Risbridger, do you think Facebook will offer some tool to map SKAD events with the SDK? Short answer, I'm not Facebook, not a spokesperson, but unofficially I have heard yes. Unofficially, I know they are working. This is a very high priority for them. But yes, that's what they're working on, to basically be plugged into SKAdNetwork just as well, right? For small developers, the SKAD event implementation seem complex. Yes, short answer, yes, Adam. I would say, yes, it's, I think it is possible to simplify it. I work with a number of subscription apps for which I think the SKAD event implementation is basically going to be free trial within 24 hours. It's going to be the simplest thing for them. So yes, it can be more complex. And I think the screenshot I showed with Singular's documentation, I think that showed the kind of complexity that is possible. So my encouragement really would be to start by just keeping it simple, right? Register D0 or retention D0, D1. First, first-time user experience onboarding, first user purchase. Hopefully that works, right? So I think it can be a little more challenging with high ARPU apps. So I do agree with, so I don't know, that I think about it, for high ARPU apps, I think it can be definitely more challenging. For some small developers, like I said, a lot of subscription apps, a lot of the subscription free trials happen on day 0, day 1. I think it's less of a problem. High ARPU apps, I think they're going to have to find a way to simplify their structure, maybe put in a starter pack within the first 24 hours. That's going to be better. Right, Gadi, the concern is not that the conversion value is not encrypted, but it's not signed. Thank you for correcting me. which means there's no way to authenticate that the conversion value was not changed by the network. Great point. So basically, the conversion value can be manipulated without, which is kind of crazy that Apple didn't contemplate that. And again, Gadi and Iran have shared more details about the specifics in Mobile Dev Memo. I will be digging through a lot of their notes and sharing some of that. So thank you guys for sharing a lot of these specifics. Reading through the other comments, fraud today is more complex. Won't click farms be more exploitative? Any opinions about DSPs retargets during the times of SKAdNetworks? Yeah, so yes. So DSPs and retargeting companies will need to be on the P list of publishers, yes, to get the post back. Any entity that requires that their traffic be tracked needs to be on the P list of publishers. So yes. How they will be impacted without the device graph. I think we had an episode of mobile user acquisition show 2 days ago, which goes into this in a lot more detail. Pau, whose inputs also informed this, Pau Quevedo. So thank you. So please check that out. I will share a link to that as soon as this is done. So please check that out. So Gadi, okay. Okay, the ones who opened the App Store view. Again, not something I am 100% familiar with the specifics of. Gadi, I will come back on that. Really, so thank you, folks, for sharing inputs here and off channel. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this provides some sort of a playbook for marketers to really go out the gate running. Really, a lot of our clients are preparing, and really, like I said, the subscription apps we work with, a couple of them are ready, really. They're obviously waiting on the ad tech to be prepared, but from their side, their end, they're pretty clear that, look, we're going to start with, free trial for the first 24 hours. A lot of others are preparing their event tracking. A lot of others are preparing for their alternative ROAS calculation, so to speak, the conversion value calculations. Right? So does Apple ban a network from forwarding the SKAdNetwork to another party? SKAdNetwork posts back to another party. Yeah, I believe not, because again, this is about my pay grade, but I understand that that's essentially how the MMPs, that's essentially how Gadi and your team at Singular are looking at this, right? Because you're looking at receiving the post back and forwarding it to advertisers. My understanding is that it is possible. I am not an engineer, but I will come back and I'll come back and share a more confirmed answer to that question. Gadi, if you have the answer, please feel free to type. Thank you. Right, to Mar's question about forwarding the SKAdNetwork post back. Right, cool. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the kind words. And of course, thank you for all the inputs you guys have been sharing, which I have, which has really informed a lot of this. I'm going to stay for a couple minutes more because there's been some great discussions going on in the chat. Right, so yeah, Apple has no reason to ban it. Yeah, right, so Apple has no reason to ban the forwarding of a post back. I'm inclined to agree, right? So again, not an engineer, so Gadi, I will defer to your expertise. Again, I will confirm to everybody as I find out definitive answers on this. Cool, guys. I'm going to hang around for a couple minutes more. And yeah, and somewhat crazy times, but hopefully, we are all going to come out on the other side. And as you can hopefully see from this, the other side looks in some ways similar to where we are today, in some ways different. And we will see how things shake up. And really the big question mark is really the precise form that Google and Facebook will take. And really, I think that's a big question mark as to how and how much the performance is going to dip. Right? We can follow the structure, but I think there's a lot of conjecture right now around how things will shake up, and we will keep you posted. Cool. Paul wanted to see something. Okay. Cool, guys. I will wrap for now. We will wrap for now. You can stop sharing. Please look for these slides. Look for today. Okay, one last question. I know Apple is in a lot of things, but would their revenues be impacted by this? Downstream, I think. Yeah, again, this is something we can conjecture, but I would say there's a downstream effect. If people advertise less on Facebook, app developers get fewer revenues, the total downloads of apps drop, then downstream there could be an effect. Mar says Apple has been building an army of media sales client relations, which may be true, Mar, but I think Apple does not have a good track record of building ad tech. I think I mentioned this the last time. iAd was terrible. Apple Search, still, Apple Search, they could just have gone and copied Google AdWords, like literally, and they just didn't do it. So yes, Apple may be building an army of media sales and client relations, but I don't know if I would bet on them building the sort of ad tech that can really capture any of the dollars they may be displacing through this. Right? Yeah. So to the question, right? So Chris can't be stopped. Your question, Apple's revenue. I think short term, I think there could be an impact because people are going to scramble and figure this out. Longer term, I would say within 3 to 6 months, people need to grow. The apps aren't going away. I think people will work with the sort of structure, the sort of playbook I described. People are working with Google UAC today. Right? There's like so little transparency in Google UAC today. If you're working on iOS, you don't get search traffic. On Google UAC search, you're basically operating as if there's just no IDFA because there practically isn't. Right? So I would say people will get accustomed. If I were to conjecture, and this is a conjecture, I think people will get used to more of a UAC-like setting. And Eric Seifert calls this like a medium, closer to a medium mixed modeling methodology where there's more reliance on incrementality. I think over the next 3 to 6 months, things will even out. I think there'll be a short-term dip when people start to figure this out. Cool. All right, so we will wrap for the day. So have a great evening, morning, afternoon, wherever in the world you are, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.